guys? Welcome back to another edition of the Addictively Speaking podcast. I'm your host, James, and today my guest is Charles Myers, and he is a porn recovery coach. And this is interesting because you're one of my first addiction people that it's not really substance related. It's also something that's different. And it is an addiction like gambling and all this other types of things you can get addicted to that aren't substances. So I think this is really great that we can dig into it and talk about something a bit different on the podcast. So Charles, it's a pleasure to meet you. Introduce yourself and tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
Absolutely. So I'm based in Tampa, Florida. I've been doing porn addiction recovery coaching for the last about 2 to 3 years now. Just kind of lose track of time with all of that. But it's just been an honor to serve the men of today's world who deeply need healing so that they can become the husbands and fathers that I believe God is calling them to be. And a lot of what that looks like is learning how to break out of the addictive cycles where we're essentially taught to suppress our emotions. We're taught to suppress the parts of ourselves that I believe are good. But when they get suppressed, it becomes like a ton of pain that gets bottled up, and it needs an outlet and it needs a release. And so we either suppress it further, or it eventually, it's like, you pop a screw or something, and next thing you know, you got someone who's snapping, and it's like, why does that person have anger issues? Well, what if it's just that there's a part of them that is deeply broken and needs healing? And so that's really where I come at from. Helping men to overcome addictions, most specifically porn addiction, since that was my big thing for 12 years.
12 years, that's a long time. So what do you think makes, because this is so different, when do you, because people watch porn, guys always do, girls do, when do you think it becomes unhealthy? Where did it become unhealthy for you? Where it just wasn't about watching it? What kind of was oh, this isn't normal?
So I wouldn't actually say that any amount of porn is healthy. And this, whether you can say that it comes from a religious, background, that I'd say it's not really something that you can just sort of draw the line. It's something that it's either something that you're in it or you're not, period. The same way that for me, I would define that boundary as my marriage is sacred, right? And so I don't want to step outside those bounds, not because I want to be stuck in a cage, but because it's what actually sets me free to be more of who I am when I'm inside of this relationship of a marriage. And so why would I then go and play outside the bounds of that marriage? So as far as what a healthy amount of porn actually is, I don't think that that's a thing. The same way that I would say there's no healthy amount of cigarettes that is, where do we draw the line there? I would say that it's the exact same thing, and, maybe this is been on the food industry, but who's just who am I to say that there's even a certain amount of McDonald's that is healthy,
Okay. Yeah. All right. I never thought of it like that. Because I guess we've all become desensitized to it all. It's part of pop culture with sex tapes and et cetera, et cetera. It's, it generates billions of dollars. The industry does. So, what specifically do you work on with the guys you work with? What are some things that you can teach them to get out of the cycle, to break the habit?
Yeah, so it's no different from any other addiction, truth be told, because anything that we go to, it's something that we're using to solve an underlying pain, right? And so we see that those pains that we're trying to solve for typically revolve around, mom didn't love me enough, dad didn't love me enough, they weren't present for me. For others, it's church wounds, and there's God wounds, and there's just social wounds, and there's also just the general pains of life. And it's what are we going to go to when we feel those pains? Do we know how to deal with them in healthy ways? Or are we told that we can lean on crutches and coping mechanisms? And so part of the belief system that I teach the men that I work with is that there's no amount of coping mechanisms that is a good coping mechanism. Like, you need to learn to live free from coping mechanisms. Otherwise, it becomes a crutch, and you give power to the thing that that you're trying to get away from over and over, whether it's pornography or drugs or whatever else it is. I don't believe that I have to give my power away to anything. I don't want that. But if I do allow myself to give that power away, then it will have power over me. But if I simply say that this is a belief that I hold for myself, that I don't have to live with coping mechanisms and I don't have to live with crutches, then I'm going to start seeking solutions that are based in true freedom. Now, the reason why I believe people go to coping mechanisms and crutches is because it's so much easier to just stay addicted. It's so much easier to stay numb. And so in order to even desire to seek freedom at the level that I talk about it, you got to truly want more than what you've settled for. And so there is a bit of a duality there of like, well, I want more, but I don't know why I keep on staying stuck here, right? And then there's the other side of it, that I didn't know more was possible. And so I always settle for what I believe I'm capable of. And so there must be this desire, not for there's got to be a better way or a better place, but how can I become more than what I have allowed myself to become up to this point? Do I like who I am now, or do I believe that more is possible? Do I believe I can become a better person? But there's always that little nuance of, yeah, but I'm always going to struggle with this addiction or this habit that I can't be free from. And that's a lot of what the married men that I work with end up talking about is, I believed that I just had to settle for living with this porn addiction for life. And I thought that it was going to just keep me disappointing my wife and being a failure because I can't stop messing up and I can't honor the marriage relationship that we I mean, they set up that marriage because it's supposed to be intimate and vulnerable and special between two people. But, I mean, there's hundreds of thousands of women that feel betrayed when their husband or their boyfriend goes and watches pornography. And I don't think that we can look at those numbers of hundreds of thousands of women who've experienced this betrayal and still say that porn is just okay, because it's literally destroying families.
That's a different way to look at it than what I picture in my own head. Because I mean, it is breaking up marriages, I imagine, and causing difficulties in relationships because it's you're going outside of the marital bounds, I guess. You're dabbling in something, you're finding somebody else attractive, or you're finding somebody else desirable in a way that you should be finding in your partner and not in pornography. So when you work with these people, is it like, do you have to admit, is it like an AA, NA type of thing, like where you have to sit down and say, I have a porn addiction, hi, my name is, like, do you do stuff like that, or is it just more like just helping them navigate things?
So, okay, this is actually a really good question. I actually really don't like it when I hear people saying, hi, my name is so-and-so, and I'm an addict. Why would you speak that over yourself? Like, why do you need to keep conditioning to your mind that that's who you are and what you are? Because what you affirm about your identity is the limit of what you will ever be capable of. And so the more that people keep speaking it over themselves, I mean, the more they're reinforcing it. And I see a big problem with that. And so the reason why this is important is because neuroscience can even confirm that the words you speak wire your brain. And so the Bible actually talks about this and explains that there is power of life and death in the tongue. And so part of what I believe that turns into is we must take responsibility for our choices. And if we blame addiction, then what we do is we either accept that I am broken and this is all I will ever be, or we just speak it over ourselves to the point that we become totally powerless and we lack the responsibility in those moments of weakness. And so it's not to invalidate anyone who is dealing with addiction. I mean, I myself was an addict for 12 years, but that was an old identity. And so I'm not going to fight for freedom and keep reaffirming that I'm this old person. I want to be a new man. And the new man cannot still hold an identity of a dead man. So if I'm going to be a different person, then I'm not going to speak over myself that I'm an addict. I'm going to speak over myself that I'm a free man. And I'm going to act like a free man acts. And I'm going to believe like a free man believes. And you can see very clearly that there's a lot of good people out there that are struggling with addiction. But the way that they view themselves is fundamentally at the core of what is wrong with why they're stuck in addiction still. Because if they never change how they view themselves and what they are worth, then they will always be limited by what they believe about themselves. But because I chose to believe differently about my worth and my value and what's possible for me to become, I no longer believe that I'm an addict. I believe I'm a free man. And my actions reflect that. And that's what I teach to my clients. And we see the same exact results for them. They go from believing, I thought I was going to be stuck with this forever, to now they believe that's not even something that I think about anymore. And so not only is this just a belief that is an opinion, this is something that I have proven through the success of my clients.
Okay. That's a very different take on it. Because I think for me, admitting to myself that there was something wrong and admitting that I had a problem was like the thing that made me move forward in finding recovery. But I mean, I think to each his own, and finding your way is part of the journey. And that's why I think it's cool to be able to share these different views on the way, recovery in any capacity is taken on. So when you say a free man, is that a terminology that you use in your program? Is that something that's part of it? And can you explain what it is to be a free man in general? Like, what does it entail?
Yeah, so really what it comes down to is it is a faith-based program. I truly believe that I could not have gotten free without God. And that part of me being a free man is less about a term that I've coined, and it's more about walking in the identity of the fact that I'm responsible for every single one of my choices and the consequences of those choices. And so I'm going to I'm going to bear the burden, the weight, that responsibility that my actions have impacts, and there's meanings attached to those impacts, right? And that then gets into things like ethics and morals. But really what it comes down to at the end of the day is that every single person takes actions according to what they believe about who they are. And so it's not anything that I've coined myself. It's that what I believe the Bible has defined for me as what it means to be a new creation is that I have free will. I no longer have to live this way. And so if I was dealing with an addiction, but I'm a new creation, then I no longer have to live according to the rules of what addiction says I need to live with. Meaning I don't need to call myself an addict because that guy is dead. I don't need to go back to an addictive habit because that guy is dead. Those belief systems that would fuel why I ended up going to addictive habits, that's in the past. That's dead and gone. And so it's not saying that I'm perfect, but what it is saying is that I've grown to become more than what I used to be. And this is honestly something that it's a journey to get to the point of recognition that there's no real thing as like addiction or freedom. They're simply taking responsibility for your actions. But I use the frameworks of addiction and freedom because they're just most commonly established with everyone around us. So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. It does. Yeah, I gotta understand what you're trying to say. Um, so with your clients, how long do you work with them? And, like how long do you run the program for? And how fast do they typically start seeing, results?
So it's actually really interesting because everyone sees freedom at a different point in their journey. We don't go off of counting the days. What we go off of is like, are they responding to the same things that used to trigger them to a relapse? And so
Mhm.
when they're able to enter back into situations and circumstances that used to challenge them, whether it's a relationship with a parent or a work situation or just a way that they feel about themselves, when they're able to go back into those things, and those things don't have a hold on them anymore. They don't have those things don't hold power over the way that that person makes decisions. That is when we start to recognize if someone is on the journey to freedom, or if they still maybe need to go around the circles of understanding, like, why am I still dealing with these same problems over and over and over? And so for everyone, it's different. Some people, they've gotten free in like as little as 15 to 30 days. And other people, it's taken 120 days. For some people, it's longer. But I'll tell you this, anyone can get freedom in a very short amount of time. The thing that stops someone is their unwillingness to take responsibility for the painful parts of their past. And whether it's something that has happened to you or something that you have done, we do not accept a victim mentality. Yes, there is a part of us that needs to grieve over the things where we were legitimately hurt, but we cannot allow those things to have control over us over a long period of time. And that's the difference, is that I'm not here to say to anyone that your pain is invalid and that what you've been through doesn't matter. It does matter, but you must be responsible for healing from it, forgiving, letting go, and moving on with life. And that's really what putting that old person to rest really looks like, so that the new man can step forth, not held back by the pains of the past and what life used to look like. And this is something that, whether you're like a religious person or a man of faith or not, the principles still hold true. And it's that you can choose to allow your past to control you and define you, or you can take responsibility for who you become and the stories that you speak over yourself and what you believe about yourself and who you are becoming. That's all your responsibility. And that's all I talk about, is that, like, I know that there's a crappy world out there, but I want to talk about you and what's going on inside. What are the things you're still running away from? What are the things that you're not acknowledging in yourself? That maybe you've had this poor self-image for a long time, and maybe we need to address that and get to the root of why that's there, so that instead of believing you're scum of the earth, maybe you can start to believe that you're actually loved and you're wanted and you're enough. And so really, it's just about helping men heal from the things that maybe it was as simple as, like, mom never loved me because she was never really loved by her parents. And so that continues down the generational lines, right? And maybe for dad, it's that he had an alcoholic dad. And then he became an angry, resentful son, but he grew up and became a father as well, but he never healed from the wounds of the past. And so he passed those anger wounds down to his son, and now we see someone who's addicted to running from the pain that he doesn't know how to deal with, because no one taught him forgiveness and no one taught him how to let go and move on with life. And really, it's just about dealing with what's going on inside, dealing with those roots, whether maybe it's a root of something that needs to be uprooted and ripped out, right? There are bad habits, and I am acknowledging that. But most of the time, what men do is we have a problem where we're a hammer and we think everything's a nail, and we think we can solve every problem with our performance. And really, the fact is that there's not only weeds in the garden, there's also parts of your soul that you're supposed to nurture and comfort, and that need time to grieve and need time to heal, because maybe that part of you as a child never felt held. And so it's really understanding when it's time to cut something off, or when it's time to just allow yourself to be present and not need to fix anything and find your worth in your performance.
Yeah. you're really speaking some stuff here, man. Like really, really talking about some stuff, like deep stuff, like things that like it does make sense, like generational stuff and things that you hold on to from childhood that might seem insignificant or that don't really that aren't huge traumatic events, but they are to you inside somewhere, right? I think you're right. Like we do hold, like as men, you do hold that stuff, and you just never speak about it because that's what the world expects. You just keep it all and hold it and bottle it, and then it comes out in all type of different ways: anger, frustration, anxiety, depression. You get all these things that come from that. So you said the program is faith-based. Explain what the basis of the faith-based program is.
Yeah, so really, as far as the program being faith-based goes, it's really just that I believe that I could not have gotten free without God. And so I believe that who I see God as is Jesus. I believe it was Jesus that he showed me how to get free. He's the one who showed me how to take responsibility for my actions. He's the one who showed me how to let go of things. And yes, I had the help of mentors to help me understand what was going on, but it was all done through the frameworks that I believe were laid out in the Bible. And so the more that I've dug into the Bible, what I found is that everything that people speak about in personal development and self-help was actually already given to us as answers in the Bible. And so I use the Bible as the foundation for everything that we do. But really, anyone can get free. Anyone can get results just by applying them, whether you look at the Bible as a faith book or just a personal development book. I believe it's all the same, and that we've come to over spiritualize and over religiousize like books of faith and religion. And really what it comes down to is that you can take the frameworks and apply them and get the results. Now, I do believe at the same time that Jesus is the only way, but that most of the time what happens is we interpret religious books and faith and scriptures so spiritually to the point that we fall into the patterns that the Bible actually lays out as what puts people in chains of things like addiction, even though that's what I believe that Jesus came here to set us free from. And so the reason why we end up going into those religious chains, or just chains of habits and lifestyles and behaviors that we don't want, is because we're choosing to believe things about ourselves that are not true. And those things are always negative, right? Because no one who really loves themselves is going to do something to hurt themselves. Yet a lot of what we see that has been pushed through like the early church days was that there's this punisher God who is bringing hellfire down on you if you don't worship him. And that's honestly just not the Bible that I've come to see. That's not how I've come to interpret it. And the reason why I can back up how my interpretation is maybe just a little bit more accurate is because I apply what I've learned and I see the results and I see the fruit. And what I see is a really good God who came to give us answers. And the reason this isn't a program is because this is just me taking what I've learned and what I've researched, and I've put it into a ton of different processes that are going to help someone get an accelerated result of freedom compared to trying to put all this stuff together for themselves. So I've already done the heavy lifting for them to understand this is what you need to do to walk in freedom and to become the best version of yourself and to live the life that you want to live. And I believe that it's something that books like the Bible actually say are a really good thing. But the reason why others might not see that is because there's something about our perception of reality that dictates if we're going to be successful in life or unsuccessful in life. And so, again, kind of tying this back to personal responsibility and being responsible for our actions, our decisions, and all those things, that also includes being responsible for what I believe about who I am. And so that's where my faith is based out of, is in God says that I'm his child, that I'm a co-creator, that I'm a co-heir with Christ. He says that I am a new creation inside of him. And basically that like I'm just like this super awesome person, and I don't have to believe all these crappy things about myself, and that the lies that people have said about who I am, those things are not true, and that I should believe what God says about me rather than what man says about me. That sounds great. And so for me, it's kind of a no-brainer. And really, again, it's just that I've seen the results. I've seen the fruit from taking what I've learned and applying it, and then being able to replicate those results. So that is why the program is faith-based, and that's how we operate.
Do the guys that come in, do they find it hard to buy into that, to the faith-based part of that, or the buy to not believe the things that people say about them, or the things they think about themselves? Do they find that difficult? Is that a challenging aspect of the program, is unteaching yourself the negative behavior of telling yourself you're not this, you're not that? Do you find that difficult?
Honestly, you're touching on something that is really core to why people even end up in things like a midlife crisis. The question is, how does someone end up there? And I'll tie this all in momentarily. But really, the reason why someone's going to end up in a midlife crisis, they're maybe 40 or 50 years old. And sure, maybe I'm, in my mid-20s right now, but I've done the research, I've studied this stuff. So I'm not speaking from a lack of understanding here. It's just that like I chose to get my midlife crisis early because I don't want to waste half my life before figuring out why I'm really alive and what I'm supposed to be doing here and what my purpose is, right? I'd be a fool to say that I'm supposed to just have a midlife crisis. And what it comes down to is this. If you allow yourself to believe everything that is true about you except for what is actually true, what you're really saying is that you're allowing everything around you to define who you are and what you are worth. And so when that happens, you start to chase that validation, you start to chase that approval because there's an insecurity that was planted inside of you thanks to some wound of the past. Again, whether it's by mom or dad or both, or the church or society, or even yourself. And as long as those wounds control you, the only decisions you'll ever make in life are to either run from the pain of that or to enforce the pain of that. And that's basically what we call being stuck in fight or flight. And so it actually is one of the most difficult things for guys in the program to address, because again, that's what is dying to the old self. In other words, it's dying to the way that I used to view who I fundamentally am as a person. And so this is why it's harder to change the older that someone gets, because they've seen themselves as the same person for 50, 60, 70 years. And so the younger that someone can learn they are malleable and they're able to change and become whoever they want to be, and that they never have to be stuck as cement. Like the younger that you can recognize you are forever malleable, and that you can become who you want to be, like the better. And so the thing is, in order to let go of the dead man and to become this new creation, what really needs to happen is you need to let go of the past. Because here, I'll lay it out for you. If a father tells his son that he's got to keep working harder and he's got to perform harder, and what the son ends up believing from that is that he is only enough. He is only loved. He is only respected by his role model when he performs well and when he works hard and when he does the right things. We call that performance-based love. And that's actually just a reflection of the father wound. And so what happens is that young man is going to grow up and he's going to spend his whole life trying to win his father's approval until next thing you know, he's 50 years old, and then he became the man that his father was to him, to his own children. And usually you don't like who that man is. Because really what the old man is, that self that I'm saying you need to die to, is the wounds that you never let go of, the things you never forgave in your own father. And so you just repeated them as the ultimate form of hatred, which is allowing yourself to become the ugliest part of what you never let go of. And so what I call this is the look what you made me become syndrome. It's where you become everything that you never wanted to become and you blame it on someone else. It's the worst thing you could possibly do, but it's the human condition to become the sum of the wounds that you never let go of.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's powerful. I mean, and it's, for the most part, true to an extent. You do become the things that you, I know now as a father, I do things that my dad did, because that's what I saw. It's what I learned. It's the behaviors I saw. So I repeat the cycle. Now they'll repeat the cycle, and then so forth and so on. Obviously, I try to be better, but still, you still have that fundamentally in you, because that's, like you said, that's your role model. That's the person you map yourself after as a child. So with addictions like pornography, I mean, pornography now is so easily accessible. You can get it on your phone. It's free. You can find it anywhere. Does that pose a massive challenge when people are trying to get away from that type of thing? Because, your phone is with you all the time. It's very tempting and easy to just be like, I'll just have a look. I'll just have a look, or do you know what I mean? Like, is it a lot of tough going at the beginning, with it, going back to it or relapsing, if you will?
So it definitely depends on the person. For some guys, they've got a lot more of a compulsive nature than others because of the severity of the wounds they're dealing with. And so if you are someone who's got a pretty good head on your shoulders, then you're probably going to get free from the addiction a lot faster. But if you're kind of more of a chaotic type, and I was a chaotic type, it's going to be a lot more difficult. And that's why it took me 12 years, is because I was so stuck in survival mode. I had blinders up all the time. I wasn't listening to anyone about what to do, and I wasn't getting help. And I had to decide for myself, without anyone's help, that it was time to make a change. And it's interesting because I hit multiple rock bottoms, and this is pretty common in addiction. We always say the last time is the last time, until you find yourself at another rock bottom, and then another one, and then another one. And so, it really is different from person to person. But it just depends. Like, are you willing to submit your life to change? Are you willing to live for something greater than what you're settling for right now? Whatever the drug or substance or addiction is, whether it's pornography or food or video games or drugs. Again, it doesn't matter what it is. To me, it's all the same. It's that there is something outside of myself that is solving a pain that I have the ability to solve, because that's what God says that I have the capability of accomplishing. But I can only do it through faith and trust in Him, that I am more than what I have accepted about who I am and what I am worth and what I am capable of. And so, it's going to be a lot easier for someone who believes he's a son of God to get free from bad habits and behaviors than someone who believes they're scum of the earth or just a crappy person. And that if they've been told their entire lives that they're good for nothing and that they have no value, they're probably not going to think of themselves very highly or like they're capable of anything. And I know that there's a lot of younger generations today that have been told that they're never going to amount to anything. And we have adults today that look down on this internet generation. But I mean, why would you ever look down on the people who are your legacy? Like, we should be looking at them to encourage them and teach them and help them grow, because it's what we always wanted. But we perpetuate the cycles that we don't learn how to break. And so a lot of this really just comes down to you can have more because you can become more.
Yeah. When you were going through your struggles with porn, did people know, or did you hide it quite well? Like, did you keep it to yourself, or did friends and family know? Like, was it something that they noticed?
So, funny enough, I used to be very silent about it, and then I got very loud about it because I wanted help. But the less help I actually found that gave me answers, the more defeated I became. And so the less and less I spoke up about it. And so it was kind of like this wave of help, 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 and then silence, and then help, 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 and then silence. And the cries for help got louder and the periods of silence got longer. And so my opportunities for change became less and less. And so I had to reach a point where I decided I was done begging for help, but never doing anything to change. And I thought that I was free a few times, I'll be honest. I had convinced myself that I was free, but here's how I know I wasn't, and here's how anyone can tell the difference between true freedom and false freedom. It's that I may have been clean and I may have been doing better in life, but when those same things came back around and the same opportunities for addiction came back around, I instantly fell. And if I instantly fall, it means that I didn't actually deal with the real root of the problem. And so again, I'm not here to invalidate anyone's addiction. What I am here to do is say that there's a root that you must address. And if you don't address that root, that it will control you. So would you rather be in control or would you rather be controlled? Right? And obviously the best answer is that I'd rather be the one in control. So then why would we allow ourselves to say that there is an addiction that I can't do anything about rather than fighting back? And it's not by treating everything like a hammer or a nail. It's by looking at the things that you don't want to look at and learning how to reconcile with them so that you don't have to be controlled by them anymore. And that's where I find healing comes from, and it's available to anyone. And really, this is actually the same thing that happens with a lot of husbands who get married and they're still watching pornography. Is they confess and they confess and they confess, and then they maybe get free for a little bit, and then maybe they get accountability, and then they get porn blockers, and they try all of these things. In fact, I just got off the phone with a client earlier who said that he really doesn't want to go back on social media because of all the hypersexual content out there. And here's the thing. Do you ever get in your car and accidentally end up at next to a prostitute? Do you ever accidentally end up at a gentleman's club? Of course not. No. If you're not an alcoholic, are you going to accidentally end up at the liquor store? This isn't a thing. So then why do the rules suddenly change when it's on our phone? You see, I love personal development and I love to grow and I love to change because now I know that I can. And so that is what my social media is full of. And I love using social media to connect with new friends and to create new business partnerships as well. But for guys that are scared of social media, that would be like me saying I'm scared of driving in a car because I might end up at a gentleman's club. And that just doesn't happen. So what you don't need on your phone is porn blockers, the same way that on the road, it's not like you can have construction crews putting up bumpers to stop you from going to some place you don't want to go. The rules don't change. It's just a lack of responsibility because it's all on a phone screen versus in real life. And so when we had this conversation, what we came to the bottom of was this realization that he had not taken responsibility. And so it came down to the fact that he was tired of confessing to his wife that he was relapsing, and he felt so much shame and guilt, and he wanted to be free from that. And so a lot of what we work on is getting free from the shame and guilt so that you no longer have to be controlled by a relapse, and instead you can stop saying I relapsed, and instead you can start asking, what happened that led me to a relapse. And when you deal with that instead, the relapse never happens.
This is how, because I think porn is such a different, because it's not a substance. I don't even really know what is available to people with that type of addiction. I don't know anything other than, meeting you. Do you know of other stuff that's available for people with porn addictions? Is there other stuff available? Because obviously with AA and NA, they're, both of them are quite huge and in recovery and stuff like that. But I don't know. I mean, I'm new to this. I want to be able to share, some stuff with people. So in case they are struggling, do you know of anything else, for people with porn addiction, like where they could start, or how they can get in contact with you, things like that?
Yeah, so I'll say, at least on the substance piece, pornography actually taps into multiple different chemicals in your brain. It taps into dopamine, which is the biggest one. It also taps into oxytocin and serotonin, adrenaline, and like it taps into all these chemicals going on inside of you. And so it's really easy to mask it. But when you get into the science of how pornography actually impacts your brain, it does the exact same things as drugs. And with dopamine, what happens is the amount of dopamine receptors that you have in your brain start to grow, and you get more dopamine receptors because you need all of those receptors to capture the massive amounts of dopamine release. But then what happens is that you go back to regular life, and now life is a little dull and things are a little depressing, and the little moments don't hit the same. So you need more exciting and more exciting and more exciting things. And so this is where porn can get really twisted and really dark. And so you start looking at more gruesome things. A lot of people are disgusted by their search histories. I'm sure anyone can imagine the things that you don't want to think about. Yeah, they're out there online, and people are looking them up, and it is the people next door that you don't want to see or know those things that go on in your neighbor's head. And for some of you, it's even family members. And so it's a problem that is very, very real, but it is not something that is talked about, I'd say, for one, because the amount of shame around it. And so the resources available are also scarce. So we have things like sex addiction recovery and other things like that. But unfortunately, and I say this carefully, but I will be honest about it. Unfortunately, most of the healing and recovery has been left up to churches and religions that understand that part of recovery from any sort of addiction is learning how to fill that God void with God and not with the things of the world. And so I believe that pornography is most dangerous because it's the only drug that exists from inside of you. But then you can externalize responsibility for the addiction onto something as simple as your phone. And so you blame the phone and you blame the hypersexual music, but you never change the music you're listening to. And you can blame the movies, but you never change the movies you watch. And you can blame TV, but you never change the channel. And, it's really like, are you going to spend your whole life allowing everything around you to be responsible for what's going on in your brain, or do you want to take responsibility and make some changes? And so again, there is some things like sex therapists and sexual addiction recovery, but the resources are not vast enough for people to understand the weight of the problem. And like we haven't even cracked into anything like how pornography is directly connected to things like pedophilia, human trafficking, or some of the weirder things that people don't like to talk about. So, we can save that for later. But I mean, it really extends deeper than we could imagine. So like if someone does want to get help.
Well, yeah, because I've had.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I do imagine that, like you said, like the darker side of it, people look up child porn, all that type of really dark stuff. And like you said, they're sometimes like the people that live next door to you and you have no idea, and that's how the pedophiles start. They start with that and then they, build their way out and start doing, what they're watching or what they're seeing, you know, and start acting out the things that they want to do. So it's dangerous. That's a very slippery slope with that kind of stuff. You know, even though it's like super illegal, but they still, they're what do they make? You know, you hear of these like what are they like groups, and they trade it like trading cards with each other. You know, sending it, you know, on the dark web to like, you know, specific people and places, and that's quite scary if you think about it. People doing stuff like that.
Yeah,
You never know. You never know that they're living next door to you.
Like, especially if you think about it, like nobody ever wants to go on Google and type in sex offenders near me. No one ever wants to do that. But I guarantee you, it scared the living daylights out of most people. Could you imagine? And so, really, like, it's something that no one wants to say. Well, you're telling me that I'm going to become a pedophile one day, and I just don't buy that. I've got a wife. I've got kids. Yeah, I'm not saying that you are, but you don't know that about your neighbor. You don't know that about your kids, like, because, like, and it's and that's a tough thing to say to some people, but really, it just comes down to that simple fact that, like, everyone has a different moral compass. No matter how much you try and like sculpt someone into becoming the best person, each person must be responsible for his or her own actions and the consequences of those actions. But the more that your brain starts to crave an addiction, and I'm sure you're familiar with this with other addictions, the less your brain cares about what is right and wrong, as long as it gets what feels good at the end of the day. And that's why porn is dangerous. You can never get enough.
And it's quite easily accessible as well. I mean, it's quite readily available at the touch of a button, which is even more dangerous than, you know, at least with alcohol, you gotta go and buy it. And cocaine, you gotta go find a dealer. Not with porn. www. Whatever. Boom. Come right up to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting because even a lot of former porn stars are now speaking out about the challenges of the industry and how abusive and dark it really is. And so it goes far beyond just getting it off every now and then. I mean, it destroys marriages, it kills your brain, it destroys the next generation. The people involved are even like killing themselves over this. We're talking actual porn stars kill themselves over this. We're talking to people who review the videos before they get posted onto these porn sites. They wake up in the middle of the night talking about having panic attacks. Like, this is good for nobody, and yet it's free. But what people don't realize is that you pay with your soul, and you pay with the consequences of the ripple effect of every time you press play. And so it really does go deep. But for anyone, and I forgot to answer your question earlier, for anyone that does want help with this, they can always reach out to me, of course, Freedom Worker Charles on Instagram or Facebook. I know we've probably gone over time, but it's a subject I could talk about all day. So
It's fine.
Yeah, I really
it's absolutely fine. I think getting more information is better for the people, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, like, really, my goal is that I want to see fathers become the present fathers that their children need, so that they can leave a legacy that is beautiful, and it is bright, and it's leaving the world better than we found it. But we can't do that as husbands and fathers if we're not becoming the best version of ourselves, and if we're allowing things like pornography to destroy our society.
Little technical issue. Charles' mic is gone. Just froze for a moment. So we'll just hold on for a sec here. Yeah. So what Charles is basically saying is that, you know, he wants people to be the best version of themselves. And I think that's a hugely important thing in addiction and recovery, is that you become the best version of yourself that you could possibly be. You know, I think that's hugely important. Not really sure what's happened to him, but we'll we'll try to continue on here. I'm finding this quite interesting from a perspective of somebody who dealt with a substance issue than an actual issue that is not substance based. It's just visual. It's a mental thing. It's a, but it does, like you said, it reacts to your brain the same way. It's dumping a lot of dopamine and stuff like that, which can become, highly, you just chase after that, don't you? You just want to chase after it. So, okay, I think our technical issue has been fixed. There we go. He's back. Charles, you dropped out there. You disappeared. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you sounding great.
All right. You dropped out there. I kind of just went off on a little bit of a tangent there to keep everybody engaged. But you kind of dropped out there. The mic went a bit funny. So anyway, I think we'll just ready to wrap this up. And I want to say thank you, Charles, for coming on the podcast and talking about your addiction and your work you're doing. Also, at the end of my podcast, I always like to ask people in recovery, what are 3 things that you need in your recovery? What are the 3 things that you need every day? Like a lot of people like to run, do physical activity, journaling. What are 3 things that help you keep on the path that you're on?
So I'd say most importantly is you need a relationship with God. Above all else, that is number 1 for me. That is central. And I believe that without that, nothing else matters. Secondly, we need to be present ourselves. What happens a lot of times is we can feel alone in this world. We can feel alone in a room full of friends. So it's not other people that are the problem. It's what's going on inside. It's my lack of love for myself. And so I believe that staying connected and present with yourself is important. So that's the second thing. And then the third thing is we need others. We were not made to be alone. We were not made to overcome addictions alone. We were not made to heal alone. Yes, you are responsible, but we are to become better together because we're all in this together. And so really that's what I'd say there is like life is about love and relationships, and we were not built to do life alone. So do it with God, do it with yourself, and do it with others.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing everything. Do you want to give everybody your Instagram handles and stuff again before we get off there so they can find you? I'll attach everything in the description to the video, and on social media, I'll tag everything. So,
absolutely.
But yeah, if you want to just shout it out one more time, that'd be great.
So the Instagram is Freedom Worker Charles. That is one word. And on Facebook, it's the same thing, Freedom Worker Charles. And if you reach out to me with the words addictively speaking, I'll know exactly where you came from. And I have a free gift for you. It's my pattern identification finder so that you can uncover the root of your own addiction and start the process to healing from that. So if that's something you want, send me the words addictively speaking. I'll know exactly where you came from. And I'll be sure to let James know. Thank you for having me on.
Awesome. Hey, man, thank you for being on. I appreciate you taking your time. I know that we had to reschedule this a couple different times, but I'm really glad that we got it done because I think it's super important that we share, all journeys, all addictions, all recovery stories. I think it's all super important. So thank you so much, man.